Today I'm giving you the behind the scenes in one of my latest patterns, the Sabir Cardigan, which was designed specifically with the male frame in mind, so it's a little bit too big for me. And if you think this is a cabled cardigan, then stick with me to see and find out if you were right. I'm Zanete, I am the designer behind Zanete Knits, and I've published over 100 patterns on Ravelry. I've spent the last 6 years perfecting top-down seamless constructions with finishing techniques that give that polished professional look and a great fit. This pattern is packed with texture, and as one of my test knitters said, it's surprisingly easy to follow, but the end result looks complex and beautiful. If you're into patterns like this, then head over to my website zaneteknits.com and subscribe to my newsletter, and you'll always be first to know about the latest releases and test calls and other perks. In this video, I'll talk about the inspiration and the backstory of this cardigan, the needles and gauge, and of course the yarn used, and then we'll cover the construction and techniques used and finish with some possible modifications and other tips. But I'll start with what the test knitters said about this project. Overall, the feedback was amazing. Knitters really appreciated the balance between approachable techniques and skill building and a finished result that they were proud to show off. They had fun exploring techniques like this unique collar construction and the mock cables, which was stated as a favorite because it was way easier than traditional cables. But the fact that it was a top-down construction was also a hit, and some praised the fit, especially around the shoulders. While this isn't a beginner-friendly pattern, this is exactly what made the test knitters love it. They enjoyed the challenge and trusted the instructions even when the process felt a little bit unfamiliar. Many described it fun and rewarding, the kind of project that keeps you engaged and also teaches you something new. And the bold texture of it made it all worth it. Some mentioned that it took quite a bit longer than they anticipated, and I couldn't agree more. This almost 3D like texture is quite yarn hungry, so there's a little bit more knitting than you would think, but the squish is real. This pattern is a collaboration with Les Garçons from Montreal in Canada, who I met for the first time here in the UK at the Unravel Festival. They were there on this spring presenting their new British DK marled version. And we started chatting about an idea to collaborate, and then Max said that this yarn looks really good when used on big cables, and that's when I knew that I'd love to make something and I'd love to go with those bold textures. I also thought it would be funny to make it for my husband because he usually hates anything textured. He's always about the plain and simple and dark colors, so making him something that is just covered with texture, I just wanted to see how he would react to that idea. I also wanted to use some techniques that would be a little bit different than your usual cabled sweater. And I remember a class I had taken at VKL in New York with Andre De Castro on tuck and woven stitches. Tuck and woven, I can't pronounce, woven, tuck and woven stitches. Yeah, that one. And it was mind-blowing to see what you could do doing other things than I usually do. So I wanted to incorporate some of that also in this design. And I came across this really cool diamond honeycomb stitch pattern, and I swatched it, and it just felt like that was the right stitch for this design. It's the perfect kind of extra that replaces the typical honeycomb look in the Aran style sweater, but it isn't what it seems. But then I came across the challenge where I compared the row gauge of this diamond honeycomb stitch pattern with the cables, the big cables that I had swatched, and the row gauge was totally incompatible, meaning that because we're slipping some stitches here in the diamond honeycomb pattern, the rows are squashed, and so you need to knit more rows to get the same length as you would do for the cables. So if I wanted to combine the cables with this stitch pattern, I'd either have to do them in horizontal arrangement, so there's some cables, some diamond honeycomb, which was totally not in my vision, or I would have to work short rows over the diamond honeycomb stitch pattern to add those extra rows in, which is also, it's doable, but I wouldn't want to spend years describing how to do it across multiple sizes, and I doubt that knitters would enjoy that kind of complexity. So I wasn't ready to take that, and I was wondering what it is that I could do to keep the diamond honeycomb stitch pattern and still get a big cable in. And just by accident I came across a baby blanket that had used this type of mock cable using tuck stitches, and it looked just like a big cable. And I refuse to believe that it was coincidence. I think it was just synchronicity at its best, because it was so unrelated but so coincidental at the same time, and it came as like the perfect solution from above somewhere. I just thought, okay, there's no way back. I have to use these mock cables with this stitch pattern because the row gauge has a very good chance of working out, and it did, as you can see. So the yarn is DK weight, and if you are not using the original yarn, then I recommend substituting with something that is light and airy, because as I mentioned, this is a yarn hungry project, and with the denser yarns you would end up with quite a heavy garment, and it would probably stretch and grow and get a lot longer than you made it. As well as other issues, so stick to something woolly and light. I would also advise against using variegated or color changing yarns, because that would distract from the intricate detail of especially the honeycomb pattern, and also of course the cables. Marled yarn, as you can see, works really well. And another note of caution is maybe don't go super dark, because that would also hide some of this detail, but there are quite a few places where we need to pick up the stitches along the fronts here and at the underarms and the collar, so it's quite difficult to do that when you're working with dark yarn. I just if you're of course well versed and are happy to do that, or you have some super pro knitting light available to you, then by all means go ahead. But yeah, I just thought I'd give you a word of caution. There is a few places where we pick up stitches. The gauge is measured using the honeycomb stitch pattern, and we need 20 stitches and 40 rows to fit in 10 by 10 centimeters or 4 by 4 inches. And we use 2 needle sizes for this project. The gauge needle size, I had to use 4mm needle to get the gauge. That's US size 6. And for the neckband or the collar, the button bands, the cuffs and hem, we use a size 2 to 3 sizes smaller for the stockinette and the ribbing. In terms of sizing, the pattern comes in 9 sizes with the recommended ease of 15 to 20 centimeters, that is 6 to 8 inches around the chest. It is very squishy and textured, so you don't want it to be too fitted, because then it kind of looks a little bit funny in my humble opinion, but hopefully you can find a size that works well for you. So the smallest one, chest circumference, is 78 centimeters. That's almost 40 inches, so 39 and 1/4. And the largest one is 178 centimeters, and that is 71 and 1/4 inches. And the way you could determine your size is by taking a comfortable sweater or cardigan that fits, getting the finished measurement around the chest of that one and finding the closest one in the measurement table here. Or you could take your chest measurement, add the ease that you want, and find the closest one that way. If you are blessed with the upper bust, that's here near the armpits, being quite significantly smaller than your full bust, then I would recommend going with the upper bust measurement, adding the ease. That way your shoulders won't be too far down. However, I am wearing size 5 and it's definitely too big. but it still looks really cool because it's a cozy and squishy cardigan. So I wouldn't stress too much. As long as it's not too tight, you're gonna be fine. Another thing that's, especially if you've knit from my patterns before, this was made for the male frame, so the sleeves are a little bit longer than usual, and if you're making it for yourself or for anybody, just pay attention to the sleeve length in the schematic table. Chances are you might not need to knit all the way through all the instruction before you reach the height, or before you reach the length of when you want to start the cuffs. Next, we'll talk about the construction and the techniques. As I mentioned, it's worked top down and seamlessly, and in a moment I'll show it close up where we begin and how it all fits together to create this European shoulder, also called a fully fashioned shoulder. And it's my absolute favorite construction because it takes care of the shoulder slope, improving the fit, as well as creates a tailored, polished look. The other awesome bit about this particular construction is that as soon as we've worked the length to cover the top of the sleeve cap, we immediately pick up stitches for the sleeve and knit all of it in one piece, the sleeves as well as the body. And you can also hopefully see there's only two kind of stitch patterns used. There is the mock cables that are situated 2 across the front, 1 on each side, and 2 across the back in the corresponding same place, as well as 1 on each of the sleeves along the center. The rest of it is pretty much filled with this diamond honeycomb stitch pattern. Wherever we don't have a mock cable, we have the diamond honeycomb stitch pattern. Of course, the exception is the collar and the button bands. They are just 2 layers of stockinette. So we start here at the back with just the neckline stitches, and initially we just work the honeycomb slip stitches, but as we increase here along the edges, we also start to introduce the mock cable panel, and all the way to finally finishing that and adding a little bit more stitches to start the outer honeycomb stitch pattern. When we get to this point, we've got the full width of the back. We put the back stitches on hold and we pick up stitches to work the fronts. So we'll pick up both of these separately. We'll pick up stitches here, work the mock cable panel and a little bit of the honeycomb panel, all the way down to when we've reached enough height for the top of the sleeve cap here. And at the same time, we'll also be adding stitches here along the front to shape around neckline. And as soon as we have enough stitches there to fit a honeycomb stitch pattern, we start following that there as well, until finally we cast on a bunch of stitches to complete the neckline here in the front. We do the same, we'll continue knitting a little bit more until we reach this length, and we put also the front stitches on hold to work the other front. And when we got both fronts, we are ready to join everything in one piece by knitting across to the end of the front, picking up a bunch of stitches here for the sleeve along the edge, joining it with the back, knitting across the back, doing the same thing. Where's the other sleeve? Again, picking up stitches here in that corner and then continuing to the end of the front. So it becomes one piece project, and it's worked kind of like raglan, except we're only adding, increasing the stitches in the sleeves to make the sleeve wider, while the body remains straight until we need to increase here to shape the armholes. The mock cable part is pretty straightforward. So we work around four or five rows even, just stockinette, and then we knit one of the stitches here with a picked up stitch. Well, actually it will be this stitch with a picked up stitch from 6 rows below and 6 stitches to the side, and that's what creates this fold here. So again, we knit 6 rows straight, and then we do that pinch there, and that's what's creating this really interesting texture. The chart shows you both the stitch that eventually gets picked up, as well as the stitch that is used to be the tuck stitch that you will knit together with that picked up stitch. And when you knit across the stitch that eventually will need to be picked up, you can use either a locking stitch marker, or what I used was just a hairpin like this, because it's very easy to pop it in the stitch and leave it. You don't need to fiddle with opening and closing the locking stitch marker. And it's also quite easy to just pull up the legs of the stitch like that, because it's quite handy. But this is now a pro tip. Eventually you get about 12 pins in your work at a time, and I got tired of them poking my palms, so I just got rid of them entirely. And when it get to the point of where I needed to tuck, I counted 6 stitches to the side, 6 stitches below, and make sure you pull it up from the wrong side. That's how I identified the stitch to knit with without any pins. So that's possible too if you get annoyed. Now the diamond honeycomb stitch pattern is also incredibly simple for the interesting texture that it creates. So essentially here we knit 4 rows of stockinette, or 3 rows of stockinette. Then we slip 3 stitches, purl 3 stitches, slip 3 stitches, purl 3 stitches. We do that twice, and we slip, making sure that the floats are on the public side. And then on the 6th row, after we worked 3 rows from the slipping, we just knit below the loose strands together with that central stitch that was slipped, and that's what's creating this diamond roof kind of thing here. And then if the next 6, and across the next 6 rows we slip the other 3 stitches of the pattern repeat, then we get an offset of that roof, and together that creates this really interesting honeycomb texture. However, using it in this cardigan is a little bit trickier. It's fine in the back panel and the front panel where the stitch counts don't change, but as you know, we had a lot of shaping here, especially in the sleeve as we were increasing stitches, and later also in the body where we increased the stitches for the armholes. We kind of need to follow along and incorporate the newly increased stitches into the stitch pattern. So you kind of always need to be aware where a pattern repeat starts and ends, and which chart stitch you kind of have to start the sleeve section. And that is what I mean by you need to be able to incorporate the newly increased stitches into the pattern. And if that wasn't enough, there's one more rule to remember, that if you do not have enough stitches when you're slipping the stitches, if you do not have enough stitches to slip all 3 at the same time, so let's say you only have 2 stitches here left to be slipped, don't even bother slipping, because that's not going to be enough then to be knit under the loose strands to create this diamond. So we just ignore the slipping instruction and we knit stockinette across here. So you'll probably see that here on the further side of the sleeve section where you purl and then you have 2 stitches left and you don't really know what to do with them. Just knit across them. And yes, it will look a little bit different than the rest of it, but overall it's very unnoticeable that there's something different going on. And before you ask, the diamond stitch pattern is not mirrored. That means that the 12 rows charts, both with the mock cable and the diamond honeycomb diamond, or the diamond honeycomb stitch, you're always working the same chart row across all sections, and there's no mirroring going on. When you look at the cardigan from far or even up close, you will not notice that there is no symmetry. So back to the yoke, we work it top down all the way to at some point we need to separate the sleeves from the body, and the yoke will be separated in sections depending on where the increases are placed. So initially there'll only be increases in the sleeve and the body will be even. Then later on you might have a situation where there is increases both in the body and in the sleeve, or you might be like, for some sizes there's no increases in sleeve anymore but just the body. So yeah, just pay attention on where the increases are placed and you should be good. And once we separate the sleeves by putting them on hold, and we cast on extra stitches here at the underarm and continue down to the hem, you'll notice that there's also a seam separating the front and the back, and that is because we don't want the width of the pattern repeat here in the diamond honeycomb to dictate how wide our chest circumference is. So there is a break in the pattern, 2 stitches wide. These stitches here are slipped on the wrong side. You'll notice that there's a slip float running through, and that is the same is true also for the bordering stitches here along the front and back in the yoke. And the reason we're slipping them on the wrong side is because the row gauge is different, very different in stockinette, that this theoretically is, and the diamond honeycomb. So we don't want any bulging here and this seam to start waving around. We just slip it every other row, and then it creates a nice, smooth and laying flat seam. And once you reached the desired length to where you're ready to do the hem, you switch needle sizes to 2 to 3 sizes smaller, and it's just a classic 2x2 rib with a classic bind off. And then we get to the sleeves, and again the sleeves are worked in the round. There's only one mock cable, the rest is honeycomb stitch pattern, and we have the same sleeve, the same seam running across here, but it's also the guiding line to where the tapering decreases are placed. And because again the stitch count is continuously changing to reduce the circumference of the sleeve, we again need to pay attention to the end repeats, the side repeats, the partial repeats, and how they are worked, where a pattern repeat starts and ends. But because the repeat is only 6 stitches wide, and it's a fairly intuitive and easy to memorize pattern, it isn't really that big a deal. Now the collar it's got 2 layers, and both of them are stockinette, so the purl side is inside. And the way we're achieving this is by knitting both layers at the same time in the round. If typically you would knit a double layer collar by picking up stitches here along the outer layer, knitting to double the height, then folding over and either do 3 needle bind off or seam it to the base. But then you end up with a hole here at the edge that you're not quite sure what to do. And also this fold line here isn't as pronounced. It doesn't feel like it's been ironed down like the tailors would do it. So the other alternative would be to pick up double the amount of stitches here along the base and just double knit it all the way to the top. But in my opinion, that is just a slow way to achieve this result. So I like to pick up stitches along the outer layer. Then we have, as we pick up the stitches, we form little purl bumps. So the strand goes to make a stitch, and then it comes at the back and forms a little purl bump, and again goes around to make a stitch and comes down here to make a purl bump. So we pick up those purl bumps on the other side of for the inner layer. And we basically have to have a long cable that goes once around the outside and second time around the inside. And then we can knit this whole thing, this collar, in the round. Just knit stitches to the desired height. And then we put both of these layers together and graft them with a tapestry needle, both live stitches. As you would closing a sock toe or something. What is a little bit more complicated here is the fact that part of the neckband we pick up stitches along rows vertically. And because of this huge stitch gauge and row gauge difference, so you have 2 stitches for 4 rows, or is it 50% more rows can fit in the stitches. So if we just picked up, there's 2 ways to go about it. We can either skip every other row and just pick up half of the rows along here. But in my opinion, if we do that, the stitches that we skipped, the rows that we skipped, we get a ragged kind of seam, a ragged join, and I don't like doing that. So what I usually advise to do is that we pick up 1 stitch for every row along this vertical edge, and then immediately, or either on the next pass, we just decrease them. So in this case, because the proportion is 2 to 1, we have to decrease by knitting every 2 stitches together to create 1 stitch. So we do that for the outer layer. So we pick all up, and then on the next pass, we decrease here just along this section on both sides. But for the inner layer, when we can do the decreasing at the same time as we pick up. So you could either, and because it's inner layer, you could theoretically just skip every other row, but we can also skip 2 purl bumps, and instead of picking up and knitting here, we are picking up and then immediately knitting them together. And that way we also have the right stitch count for the inner layer on the first go. So yeah, that's all there is about this collar. Of course, you can substitute it with whatever collar method you'd like, because there's nothing really special in the setup of the neckline that wouldn't allow you to do another collar. But after the collar is done, we do the double knit button bands. And the first step there is you could attach the buttons on either side, because it's very, very similar how to do the buttonholes. You can swap those easily. First we pick up stitches here along the edge all the way, and then we use the tubular cast on to cast on the width of the button band. And as we work along, as we increase the button band height using double knitting, we simultaneously attach it to the edge here by knitting the last stitch together with one of the stitches that we picked up. So we kind of have a lot of stitches on the needle, and we decrease as we go up. And again, when we get to the diamond honeycomb part, we have to be aware of the row and stitch gauge difference. Here what helps is that we are using a smaller needle, and that also helps with the row gauge difference. So we don't need to be knitting together every 2 stitches here, but there is some adjustment that's required, otherwise the button band wouldn't lay flush and even. It would start to flare like that, flare, bulge and wave and stuff. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And the buttonholes are these vertical buttonholes that are very flexible. We knit the double knit across the whole width until we need to make a buttonhole, and then we knit only across half of the button band width until we get to the desired height of the buttonhole, and then we go back and knit the other half again back and forth using double knitting until we get the matching height, and we join them and work again the full width until the next buttonhole. And if you have big buttons, you knit more rows before you do the other side, and if you have smaller buttons, you knit less rows before you do the other side. So that's why it's a very flexible, but at the same time very neat and polished way to do buttonholes here. If I had to talk about possible customizations and adjustments, then the first most obvious one is the length. Because it's top down, we can make the body and the sleeves as long as we desire. It could be a cropped, it could even be a coatigan, and the same with the sleeves. I didn't see any short sleeve versions in the test knit, and it's probably something to do with how textured and squishy this is, immediately giving this is a winter garment vibe. So no short sleeve versions, but theoretically there's nothing stopping you and you could do that. The way the button band works is that you can also modify easily how many buttons you add and how big you add them, because we know this vertical buttonhole here is quite flexible to adjust for different sizes. In terms of the collar, if you wanted it to match the cuffs and the hem, you could also substitute working this double layer collar with just a simple 2x2 rib, and you could work it higher up to make a turtleneck cardigan as well, because we add the button bands at the very end, so that would be accommodated for. Now you probably might be wondering if you could make it into a V-neck. No one dared to do that, but theoretically it's absolutely possible. It's just not super trivial. You'll see that in the pattern there will be some place where it says cast on the remaining stitches for the neck here at the front. You could ignore that instruction, and because you've already increased the stitches here at that cadence, you could continue doing that. You will also have a good feel of how the honeycomb stitch pattern incorporates the new stitches, so you could continue the increased cadence as you have established prior to casting on here at the front. And then instead of working separately the collar and button bands, you'd have to pick up stitches along all of the back neckline and the front opening to make a really huge button band that only has buttonholes in the right places. So that would be my, if I wanted to make this into a V-neck cardigan option as well. If you have any other modification ideas, please shoot me an email and we can discuss. I am sure that anything is possible. It just depends on how much time you and I have at the time, and your experience as well, of course. So that's it. If you think you'd like to have a go at this top-down seamless cable looking cardigan without any actual cables used, and that has a European shoulder and a really unique collar construction, then you can download the pattern on Ravelry or Etsy. The links are in the description below. A huge thank you again to Les Garçons, who trusted me with their gorgeous yarn to make something. I did really enjoy this project, even though it did take a little bit longer than my usual ones, mostly because of the size, but also, as I mentioned, because of the row gauge. If you're into this kind of patterns and into this kind of knitting and skill building with new projects, then please go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter at zaneteknits.com, where I will announce all the test calls and pattern releases. I hope this was useful, and if you have any questions, shoot them in the comments or email me, and I'll see you in the next one.